There's an almost paradoxical game development saying I've heard a couple times that's just, you make the first level last. What are the reasons for this? Well, development is a learning experience. Making a game takes years, and it stands to reason that you'll be getting more talented at developing, working with your engine and your team the whole time. Designing each part of the game will teach you more tricks of the trade, more workarounds and flourishes, and so then, when you're almost done, you can turn around and put all of that into the very first level. Because, of course, this is the one part that you know every player will play. The first time I heard about this strategy was with the original God of War series. At the time, God of War 2 had one of the absolute most bonkers openings I'd ever played. Honestly, it's still up there. Kratos as a god fighting the literal Colossus of Rhodes, a giant sculpture that you tear apart piece by piece while it kicks its dumpster-sized feet through walls at you. The Colossus of Rhodes is buck wild, a 17-phase boss fight that ends with you jumping out of its big metal skull. God of War 2 felt like it was pushing the PS2 hardware to its absolute limits. And nowhere in the game is that more evident than the first level, because, of course, they designed it last. The implicit second part to that saying, though, is you put your best foot forward because lots of players won't make it to the end of your game. This isn't a judgment on gamers, although they will face judgment, nor is it a failing of a developer. Games are long, and people have lots to do, and to be honest, it's just hard to finish them sometimes. What this means is that hiding a big gameplay upheaval or special event far into your game is a real risk, because it's spending time and development resources on something that you can't be sure many people will see. And it's because of that I have this weird fascination with games that just do it anyway. Games that keep an ace up their sleeve until the last possible second. Games that, despite all the logic to the contrary, don't show what they're capable of until just before the end. Okay, time for the disclaimers, and there will be several. First off, this video will have spoilers. A lot. They are almost all gameplay spoilers. I won't be doing a beat for beat of the story, but I know people still care about these things, so listen for me to say the name of the game, and if you don't want to be spoiled, skip that part. They're also time-stamped. No complaining about this. Secondly, as I mentioned, the surprises I'm talking about here are based on gameplay, not story. While it was absolutely crazy when we found out that the source of the old blood was Monster Energy Red, since it was delivered in the same kind of cutscene as the rest of the game, it doesn't belong on this list. Third, I haven't played everything. Or even most stuff. So channel your fury at me not including a great example of this into telling me about it in the comments of this video, because I do read them, and I love this sort of thing. Obviously. Alright, game on. Thumper is a game that I imagine a lot of people started, played the first couple levels, thought, you know what, this is really cool, and I see what it's doing. And then they put it down. And they would be right. They did see what it was doing. Almost. Thumper's developers refer to it by perhaps the coolest genre title of all time, Rhythm Violence. You play as this little metallic beetle rocketing along a roller coaster track, and the entire game uses only one stick and one button. All you've got to do is hit these buttons and curves as they pop up, and they pop up with a rhythm consistent with the extremely dark and heavy tracks that are playing in the background. So that's the rhythm part. What's the violence? Well, for one, Thumper is fast. Really fast. Like, alarmingly fast. As you scream down these tracks, hitting the buttons and curves as the beetle feels less like intentional control inputs and more like ricocheting. You ever play Mario Kart and think, well, I don't need to hit the brakes if I just smash into this wall to turn? That's a lot of Thumper. Sparks flying and drums booming. When you mess up and run straight into a wall, the camera just keeps moving forward with the shattered bits of your body, like you've driven into a wall and just been thrown out the front windshield. And honestly, just that would be more than enough to accept the rhythm violence moniker. But of course, there's more to it than that. Because in Thumper, if you slalom down this coaster from hell for long enough, you reach one of the bosses at the end of its levels, and oh, very cool, very chill. Cool. I'm also obligated to mention that Thumper is best played in VR, where the track feels even more visceral and the bosses feel 10,000 feet tall, and it is not for the faint of heart. But wow. Thumper is really hard. And one of the reasons for that is the rhythm part of the game is sometimes difficult to pick up on. Although one of the game's two leads is Brian Gibson, former developer on Guitar Hero and Rock Band, the soundtrack feels less like any of the predictable anthems from those titles and more like, I don't know, the band Lightning Bolt. With Brian Gibson. The music in Thumper is weird and dark, and the time signatures are actually bananas. Level 2 is in 2-4, level 7 is in 7-8, level 9 is in 9-8. Getting a handle on the tempo of Thumper's tracks is significantly trickier than in rhythm games with more traditional music, and it's also essential, because that tempo is the only help you're going to get going through these curves at the speed of sound. There are monsters and lasers and centipedes, but at least the music track under all of it is consistent. Well, actually, remember how this is an essay about the ends of games? You would be forgiven for thinking that the end of Thumper is basically like the rest of the game. It is the fastest track with the most unforgiving tricks, and at the end you fight the biggest monster, and all that is well and good, and if credits rolled after that, I wouldn't be disappointed. But instead of the monster vanishing in a supernova of light, the path just continues through the teeth and churn. Another mention, this is truly nightmarish in VR. And then you're out the other side and the level is still going. And not only is it still going, it's getting faster within the course of a single level. And when it's just teetering on the edge of fully out of control, well, it teeters for a while and then it falls over the edge. Throughout the game, you've got little hints of this, I don't know what to call it even, just some big malicious inverted pyramid. It shows up, plays an ominous tone, and then you fight a boss. But at the end, Big Pyramid shows up to stay, and it shows that it is in more control of this hell world than anything else in the game, because suddenly it's hard to communicate just how destabilizing this is. The game is breaking basically the foundational principle of its own world. The sound itself, the tempo, the beat that underlies the entire gameplay system warps. Previously, it didn't feel like the world could be any more hostile. Spikes, bugs, tentacles. But now it's like the laws of physics. The air itself has turned against you. If performed correctly, there's only about 45 seconds of gameplay like this, but in that 45 seconds, it effectively expands the possibility space of the world. In many ways, it makes you feel even smaller. Although you technically emerge victorious against the big mean triangle, the pervasive sense isn't mastery here. I felt more like I had been allowed to glimpse the world past the shadows on the wall for just a moment, before being snatched back down. And I think this only works when something this radical is saved for this late in the game. If the time warping was present throughout the whole thing, it would just become another mechanic, another feature on Mr. Bone's Wild Ride. But because it's reserved until you assume you've really seen everything, it becomes more than a gameplay quirk. It's a transgression. The game betraying the common language you've built up over the past several hours. And I love it. Pistol Whip is a game that doesn't need to be complicated and isn't. It is John Wick with a rhythm section. It's Time Crisis in VR. It's that one scene from Baby Driver. And because all those things sound absolutely rad, Pistol Whip is my third favorite VR game. However, it's not really a game built on surprises. The joy of Pistol Whip is playing the same levels at increased difficulties, easily bobbing and weaving through a hail of bullets while firing back exactly in time with the music. The enemy spawns are eminently predictable, their types are visually distinct. Pistol Whip is absolutely a power fantasy type game, and the fantasy is being perfectly knowledgeable about what you're going to face. The music aids you in this. Start vibing with the beat, and you can predict when and where the faceless goons will show up on screen. Pistol Whip has had excellent support since release, and has added a whole bunch of new tracks to the game, completely free. It's been a real pleasure to sign in every couple months, see that new stuff got added, and get to mastering new levels. And a few months ago, they dropped a huge and more experimental update, a set of levels that actually follow an explicit story and has a character and dialogue and stuff. This already is a really fun change within the rules of the game. The story is intentionally schlocky, somewhere in the Far Cry Blood Dragoniverse of goofy foe throwbacks, but the music is still good, and it's always fun to shoot robots. Again though, the setting might be different, but the gameplay is largely identical. Rows of dudes show up, shoot once or twice at you, you duck the bullets and return fire in time with the music. One cool wrinkle it throws in is the addition of burst fire for your guns, which adds a surprising amount to the moment-to-moment gameplay, but still fundamentally feels like the same experience. And then, in the final level of the story pack, you get into an argument with a robot. It says, "Then I'll kill you, myself." The music crescendos and I get that in your standard game, this might not seem radical. We've all fought helicopters or gunships or some other flying mean thing before, but in the context of Pistol Whip, this is breaking all the rules. First and most simply, this ship is persistent. For every other level, enemies basically stand still or run forward a little bit and you eliminate them within seconds of them appearing on screen. The feeling of pumping dozens of rounds into a persistent foe is completely new here, and it's super mobile. This thing flies off screen, comes in for strafing runs, repositions itself constantly. There are moments when it seems completely gone and you have to shoot standard enemies again, but you're constantly glancing around, just waiting for this thing to swoop back in. It is truly unpredictable. And that's to say nothing of how it attacks, whereas before each enemy would shoot one bullet at you or maybe some focused rapid fire from a turret, this thing is an absolute barrage. This boss fight perfectly gets across the tone of the level, the fine, I'll kill you myself of it all. The kid gloves are off. What's so clever is it's not actually that much harder to dodge this boss than the other stuff you've been doing all game. You just bob and weave more or less like normal. But it feels exponentially more dangerous. There are some really good moments here. One of my favorites is when it starts dropping obstacles right in front of you. Lean left, lean right, duck. And then when you've ducked down low and are more or less crawling through this tunnel, bam, another barrage. This is the game asking you to roll around on the ground. And God, it's fun. I think we've all played games that change the mechanics in a frustrating way right at the end. I've climbed and shot my way through Uncharted, and right at the end it's asking me to do a sword fight? It's not fun when a game feels like it's training you to do one thing and then asks you to do something else. Where Pistol Whip excels is that every skill you've been practicing remains. It's just that the framing of those actions is pushed way beyond what you thought the game was able to do. It's not unusual to give a player a big, game-breaking power right at the finale. Souped-up gravity gun, infinite rage mode, the basic stuff. That's not what Superhot Mind Control Delete does. Mind Control Delete is the Superhot special. Time only moves when you move, as it has in the original Superhot and Superhot VR. The graphical style is the same, the sound design is the same, even the glitchy storytelling aesthetic is the same. But one of the ways Mind Control Delete differentiates itself is with its special abilities. At the beginning of a set of levels, you get the opportunity to pick an almost superpower to use. You might be able to lunge forward and smack a guy much faster than you can ordinarily move. You can bring a katana to throw and then immediately summon it back to your hands, slicing anyone in the way in half. You can swap bodies with enemies, teleporting you across the map and making your old body explode. It's fun to play with these abilities. Mind Control Delete gets pretty tough, and so your survival is often contingent on your ability to effectively harness your superpowers. It's alarming, therefore, when the game demands you give them up. If I didn't have the body swap ability, I simply would not have been able to get this far, and now, sayonara. But okay, I understand what the game is doing. The final couple levels are going to be a real test of skill. Strip out all the fancy stuff, just you and the enemies, and time only moves when you do. Classic. That is what I thought. And then after a single level, the game asks what you want to give up next. Shooting, punching, jumping, looking. This is weird. I give up jumping, something I rarely did anyway. Another level, what do you want to give up? Shooting, punching, throwing, looking? And so on. Keep giving things up. Keep making yourself weaker. Truly one of the most memorable game moments I've had in the last year is being unable to do anything except move and punch. I couldn't even glance to one side or the other, just blindly strafing, hoping bad guys would walk into my fists. And they did. And then I gave up punching too. Ultimately, you just have to give up entirely. You give up and everyone dies and the game ends, but I refused for a long time. And let me tell you, it's a weird experience to feel like there's something more you need to accomplish, but you literally can't move to do so. In some ways, Mind Control Delete falls into the category of gacha indie games. I haven't even told you the bug nuts crazy part where after you give up and everybody dies, you have to sit for 2.5 hours while the screen flashes super hot at you. No, this is not a joke. Yes, it used to be 8 hours before what I like to call the coward's patch. This kind of gimmick falls more in line with something like Frog Fractions or Doki Doki Literature Club, games I'm sure people have already written theses about in the comments. That gacha is cool. I don't mind when a game kind of trolls you. But Mind Control Delete isn't built around this twist. It's a full game that does more than enough weird stuff throughout the whole experience, and when it comes down to it, I've played a lot of gacha games and a lot of Superhot, and neither have ever made me feel like I did at the end of Mind Control Delete. It's like when Hal gets unplugged in 2001, except I am Hal, and my version of singing is struggling in vain to complete a level when I can't move, look, or punch. The last game I want to talk about kind of breaks the rules that I've set up here, which is fitting for the thing this essay is about. I was originally only going to have the previous 3 in this essay, a good number, solidly made my point. And then I played The Wonderful 101. The Wonderful 101, developed by Platinum Games, does not quite fit the formula I've set here because it is a game that is doing everything all of the time. Previously, I've talked about games that do a really defined thing and then they surprise you by offering an unexpected twist on that thing. The tempo doesn't stay consistent in Thumper, Pistol Whip maintains its mechanics but throws in a boss. I kind of don't even know how to pin down the one mechanic in Wonderful 101, but the end of that game is so bonkers that I need to talk about it to someone, or I feel like my head is going to explode. So, I'll do my best to explain what's going on here, because this game is harder to parse visually than almost anything I've ever played. You control not just one, but an entire swarm of superheroes. 100, as it turns out, that's where the name's from. You run around these environments, and I want to emphasize that even though the camera's really far back and their movement is insect-esque, you're not supposed to be tiny here. It's just that everything else is huge. To measure up to the apartment block-sized enemies you're fighting, all 100 heroes can link together, making giant tools, a big fist, a big sword, out of their actual bodies, and then swing those giant tools at the gianter enemies. Because the game's primary mechanic would be basically the ludicrous climax to any other story, or, a Bollywood movie, Wonderful 101 tries to continuously one-up itself with the situations it puts its characters in. Falling down a skyscraper, throwing propane tanks at a dragon, making your body into a machine gun to shoot a UFO, getting into a lava-filled boxing match with a giant robot. It is relentless and overwhelming, and to be clear, not all of this works. I messaged multiple friends saying this is literally the most frustrating game I have ever played. But by the time I reached the end, well, that's a bit of a misrepresentation. Let me tell you the times I thought I reached the end. I thought I was at the end when all the buildings in the city came together to form a giant robot that I used to knock out an even gianter robot. I thought I reached the end when I flew that giant robot into space to use an orbital laser to wipe out the remaining alien invaders. I thought I reached the end when a Death Star appeared, I smashed directly into it, attacked the brain that controlled it, and ultimately grabbed my own ship like a gun and pulled the trigger, completely annihilating the control center. At any of those points, the credits could have rolled, and I would have messaged those same people I was venting to say that, good lord, did Wonderful 101 really turn things up at the end. But all of that would have been preemptive, because it would have missed when the space station transformed into a planet-sized evil robot and I had to beat it by drawing a giant P on screen, a P for Platinum, aka Platinum Games, aka the studio that made this very game, delivering a final blow to their own final boss. And then, the cherry on top of the cherry on top of the cherry on top of the sundae, every character in the game joins together to shoot the biggest possible laser at the biggest possible robot, screaming the whole time, hammering their control panels as you hammer your controller. It is maybe the single most absurd ending I've ever had the privilege of playing through, and I need everyone to know about it. The Wonderful 101 can be an infuriating game. It did not sell well when first released. According to Steam, only 20% of players have actually finished it. There were many times that I thought about putting it down. There is very little logical or rational reason for Platinum to have put the sheer, ludicrous, gobsmacking amount of effort into the last few hours of the game that they clearly did. But despite that, because of that, I can't help but adore it. To grossly oversimplify, you make the first level perfect because it makes sense. It's the first thing people play, it's what you show off for demos, it's the sensible, marketable, profitable decision. You make the last level perfect because you love the goddamn thing. And it's impossible for me to leave these experiences without feeling a little bit of that too. This video was sponsored by CuriosityStream and Nebula. When I was a kid, I loved to watch DVD bonus features, bloopers, featurettes, those games where you use the arrows on your remote control. They have mostly gone away in the streaming world, but on Nebula, a platform featuring me and your other fave video people, we've kind of started doing it again. For instance, I lost my mind at the Wonderful 101's ending, but this isn't unusual for Platinum Games. And on Nebula, instead of this ad read, I'm talking about some of their greatest hits. It would be the highlight of most other studios' careers, but instead for Platinum, it just seemed to kind of set the standard that then they attempted to one-up for basically every other game they made. I'm not the only one who does this. Legal Eagle has more law stuff. Jill Barrett talks even more intensely about swords. I love these kind of bonus features. And because of Nebula's partnership with CuriosityStream, you can get both of them for a year for less than 15 bucks by following the link right down there. CuriosityStream, in the meantime, has apparently dedicated itself to making things specifically for viewers of this channel, because there is now a tab on their browse section labeled Mega Structures. Are you kidding? Was this button made for me specifically? I watched a documentary on Gaudi. It ruled. CuriosityStream rules. Get them both for a very reasonable rate by signing up at curiositystream.com/Jacob Geller.
Evil's coming, and you need a savior to appear. 100 rangers will take the lead, they gladly volunteer. Way up high, can you spy them out in outer space? 200 eyes like fire, looking danger in the face.
Unite, morph!
A single hard point to blade.
Unite, sword!
They dish out justice in spades. When the world is teetering, hanging by a thread, they administer a beating and stomp the menace dead. Go team, demolish those fiends, toss them in the garbage can. Wipe the floor with Alyx galore till the world is thick and span. They can do it, they can do it.